Hi, I'm Greg Dell with Dell Disability Lawyers, here with attorney Stephen Jessup, and we're going to have the opportunity to discuss with you a recently resolved case against Prudential Insurance Company. And Steve, as you know, in these videos, we like to talk about what you were able to do for the client, why the disability company denied our client, and then what steps you took in order to win the appeal, and what it's going to mean moving forward in order to keep our client on claim. So let's get into the background and history of this claim, about how the client came to us and what the first things were that you had to do.
Yeah, so he contacted us after his claim had already been denied, and he was denied at the short-term disability stage. He worked for KPMG, which I've had quite a bit of experience with that policy. I've represented multiple clients after their claims have been denied. He had initially went out, he was a managing director in their tax consulting department, so he was pretty high up in the company. So when he went out, he filed this claim. Prudential initially approved it, saying, all right, we find that you're disabled, you can't do your job. And then after only a month of being on claim, all of a sudden they had one singular review done by a nurse who determined that there was nothing wrong with him based on the fact that he could perform activities of daily living. And actually in the denial letter highlighted things like his grocery shopping, going to his kids' sporting events, mowing the lawn, and watching TV for 2 hours a day.
Right. So let's back up a second. He worked for KPMG, which is one of the world's largest consulting firms. Do you know, what exactly did he do for them?
He was in their tax consulting department.
Okay. And then you mentioned that he got denied after a month. Is that normal, unusual from the period of time in which you see denials?
I wouldn't necessarily say that it was all that unusual for my experience with Prudential when it comes to this policy. The majority of people who go out from KPMG, they're high wage earners. So there's significant benefits to be paid. I feel in a lot of ways, once I got the file and reviewed it, that it was a denial almost in a way to try to force him to go back to work so Prudential could avoid pretty significant financial responsibilities and liabilities that went into the long-term disability. Normally, as we see a denial from the get-go, right? They're denied at the inception of the claim, saying we don't think there's enough here. So it's very unusual in the sense that it was denied, and then a month later, basically relying on the same information they used to approve it, giving him a clean bill of health to go back to work.
That's what I was thinking as you were telling me, because if they want to deny him,
deny
him 30 days earlier. But then again, this was a short-term disability claim, and compared to long-term disability, what was your elimination period, and can you explain what that is?
For the short term?
Yes.
7 days. Okay. So after the 7 days, he became payable, so he was paid about 3 weeks worth before they denied the claim, whereas in his short term, right, the short term period, which was 3 months under this policy, is the elimination period for the long term, so the time that he has to be disabled prior to being eligible for long-term disability benefits as well.
But I always find it strange that it was 7 days elimination period, they pay him for a month, so basically they're saying in 37 days, or basically 4 weeks, we think whatever was, we agree, you were unable to work for that period of time, but now we think you got better.
Yeah, some vast improvement that would see him go back to doing what his job entailed, which was incredibly cognitively demanding work.
And at the time that he filed for disability, who was he treating with, and what was his diagnosis?
He had a psychiatrist, and the psychiatrist was actually also giving the counseling and therapy as well, in addition to the medication, and the diagnosis was depression and anxiety.
And in terms of depression and anxiety as a disability, how often do you see that as the basis of disability, and how often do you see those claims either get approved and then remain on approval?
Well, mental health claims form the basis of, one of the largest reasons for going out on disability other than some type of chronic pain condition. And it really is kind of, it depends, right? If it's a low monthly benefit amount that's going to be paid, most of these policies are going to have a 24-month limitation, and his policy does, meaning, for the life of the policy, he gets 24 months due to a mental health condition. So if it's a lower benefit amount, sometimes the insurance companies will, do a risk analysis, business decision as to, is it cheaper for us to pay the claim than as opposed to fight it? In this situation, obviously, I think for them, they thought it was in their benefit and their, to fight this particular claim. So it's kind of weird. It's really kind of case by case on the insurance company, and then seeing the overall picture of the valuation of the claim. Now, when you see a claim file after a denial, the insurance company and the people, handling the claim, there's nothing in that file talking about, what's this going to cost us over the matter of time. But there's thresholds when they see what a monthly benefit amount's going to be.
We know that because we've deposed every company, we've seen their claims handling manuals, and we know internally what's going on there. But I think if you ask them, is there a difference whether you're looking at a file for someone who's $500 a month versus someone who, I think in your case, was over $20,000 a month, are they going to look at it differently? And they'll usually say no, and really technically they should be looking at it the same. Why is one person who has $20,000 a month entitled to any more attention on the file than the person who's 500? But let's not forget, Prudential is in business to make money, and all the disability companies, I'm not singling them out, and they got protocols that say, and historically, we better look at this with higher scrutiny because this is going to cost us as much as what usually 10 or 15 claims would cost us. So, okay, so what, you got the denial, client hires you, what'd you have to do, and what did you do?
First thing is get the claim file. You know, always want to get that so you can see everything that they've done, vocationally speaking, medically speaking. You know, reached out to his doctor. His doctor was highly supportive. One of the issues that we did have and difficulties in it is after disability, the client had relocated. So he was living in a different state from his doctor and then doing telemedicine, which during, you know, the period of COVID, that became more acceptable to the insurance companies, but they were still having an issue with it because it was mental health treatment. They felt that in-person would be better. So that posed some problem with it, but the biggest thing that stood out to me in the claim file, and going back to what you said about insurance companies going to treat every claim the same in the way they review it, well, yeah, that was for sure here because all they did was have a nurse do it. They were certain to give the same crappy review that they generally do. One nurse who in her report said nothing with regards to what the client's actual occupational duties were and what that was. Because the policy is, are you disabled, you know, performing the material and substantial duties of your occupation? She only looked at the records and, like I said, noted these activities of daily living that he was able to, you know, co-manage finances with his wife and take out the garbage, and it shows that his global functioning has improved, so there shouldn't be anything that's preventing him from going back to work. And that's what Prudential used to deny the claim, was just that report.
But it's so
unfair
I mean, unfair,
horrible.
and I just want to use the word disgusting because having anxiety or depression, the diagnosis in this case, doesn't mean you need to be stuck in bed and you can't get out of bed. It's so many more factors than that, especially when you have someone who had such a complicated job and was earning in excess of $500,000 a year. Those clients are paying this person over $1,000 an hour on a project basis, and this individual is basically saying, look, I can't focus, I'm not thinking clearly, I don't even have an interest in even being here. It's almost like, and he's telling the company, look, you may think it's a lot, you're paying me $20,000 a month. I make $50,000 plus a month, and then a nurse looks at the file and says, what, you can take the garbage out or drive your kids to school?
And that was really it.
So what'd you do to get Prudential to change their mind and pay his benefits?
Well, one of the first things I did, just knowing, you know, and then the nurse had also in the report there was no objective evidence to support, you know, impairment. Well, what part of the argument in the appeal was, by nature, his condition has subjective reports. There's no objective evidence. They didn't notify him that he had an objective evidence requirement, or even tell him what type of information he could provide to satisfy. You know, sometimes just in a denial letter, if it's like a chronic pain issue, sometimes they'll give you a list of things you can do to perfect. Here, nothing like that. So I knew that was going to be an issue, even though there's plenty of arguments to make that it's inappropriate. You're creating language requirements in the policy that don't exist and things of that nature. But in a situation like his, where I did know it was impairing his ability to concentrate, focus, all that, I did send him for neuropsychological testing. And that testing did come back that there was no evidence of a neurocognitive disorder, but that due to the severity of the depression and anxiety, he did have marked limitations in concentration, short-term memory retention, and then executive functioning. So that was the way to establish this idea of objective evidence of how the condition is impairing what would be his ability to do his job. And then with that, I worked with his doctor, sent an in-depth questionnaire for the doctor to complete. And like I said, the doctor was very supportive, so it was also very good. And outside of the questionnaires I sent, working on a written response to Prudential's, opinion to, his patient, if you will. Because at the end of the day, this nurse is basically trying to say that this psychiatrist doesn't know what he's talking about. So he didn't take kindly to that. So his response, reflected that. So those are the main things we did. There wasn't a lot of additional medical information to be had because I wanted to turn this appeal around for him relatively quickly. and we were able to. So, submitted the appeal. As we know, they have 45 days to render a decision on an appeal. I think, in reviewing for this summary for you, 27th day after it was submitted, and we're talking, it was submitted right before the Christmas holiday, we had an approval on the short-term disability. And then also as part of the appeal, I know that you can give an insurance company extra bites at the apple if you're not careful. So in doing the short-term appeal, they could have easily said, okay, well, we feel that he's disabled for the remainder of the short term, and then transition to long-term and say, oh, he's not disabled there. So I set it up in the short-term disability appeal, looking forward into the idea of long-term disability, and then even as part of that appeal, requesting and demanding they do immediate contemporaneous review for his entitlement to his long-term. And then within a couple days after notice on the short-term, we got an approval letter on his long-term disability as well.
So you were simultaneously doing an appeal and applying for the long-term at the same time, because often people call us and the timing works out where they're already into long-term and they got denied short-term, and I know that we'll say, look, we'll file your long-term and we'll handle the short-term. And sometimes it may be, the short-term may not be worth pursuing, but you can still move forward on the long-term, because often short-term disability is not a condition precedent to getting long-term disability, meaning you don't have to get approved for short-term. We've had many clients who don't get short-term, but then can get approved on long-term. And then sometimes we've had the strategy where we take the long-term disability approval, go back to short-term and be like,
I just did another one of those yesterday.
yeah, so why did you approve the not why, long-term disability approved, this is now extending the period of time. Clearly our client was disabled back when you said they weren't.
I think what it is kicking the can down the road.
Yeah.
The short-term department or whatnot, they don't want to deal with it. I think sometimes too, the claims people are overworked, they have large caseloads. If they deny the case, one of two things is going to happen. The person doesn't pursue it, go back to work, or they appeal. And if they appeal, it gets off that claims person's desk, so it's not their problem anymore. So I feel a lot of times, especially in the short-term into long-term transitionary period, I think it's just, kicking the can down the road to avoid having to do the excess work on it.
Right, and the other thing is that by the time we got everything together, got all the additional medical support for the short term, we were already well into the long term. So it would be unfair to the client to say, for Prudential to not even consider the long term, to be like, hey, well now we're 6 months in, and now we're first going to go back and make you wait another 60, 90 days. And I remember you told me in this case you got the short term, and then within a week or so later, the long-term rolled right in, which was great because you were looking out, like we always try to do, to protect the benefits for our clients and keep them getting paid. So congratulations on this case, another great victory for you and for the firm. If you're someone out there who has a Prudential long-term disability denial, feel free to call Stephen, myself, any of our lawyers. We'll always provide you with an immediate free phone consultation, and we look forward to the opportunity to assist you.